we've learned how to make decisions in our programs using conditionals. But what if we need to repeat a task multiple times? For example, printing a message 10 times, or filling out multiple forms, or counting numbers of steps during a workout. Repeating tasks manually can be tiring, but in programming, we can automate these repetitive tasks using loops. In this lesson, we'll explore what loops are and how they help us simplify repetition in Python. Imagine you are packing boxes for a move. Instead of packing each item one by one manually, you create a system that picks an item, pack it, and repeat the process until all items are packed. This repetitive process is similar to how loops work in Python. They repeat tasks for as long as needed, saving time and effort. So, what are loops? Loops are a way to repeat a block of code multiple times. They are especially useful for tasks that involve repetition, like performing calculations or displaying messages multiple times. Let's see a simple example of repetitive tasks. For example, let's say we want to print from 1 to 10. We are going to print, we have 1, then we have another print, we have 2, so we have another print, okay, we have 3, another print, we have 4. So we are going to continue that up to 10, which is going to be 10, all right? So if we run that, we are going to have 1 to 10 printed in our console. You can see how tedious it is to just print from 1 to 10. Imagine we want to print from 1 to 100 or 200 or 1000. Doing that manually will be a whole lot of tedious work, which is also prone to error. The solution to this kind of problem is loops. There are two types of loops in Python. We have the for loop and the while loop. The for loop is best for iterating over a sequence like a string, a list, or a range of numbers, whereas the while loop is best for repeating a task as long as a condition is true. So we are going to start by learning the basics of the for loop and how to use it with numbers. The basic syntax of the for loop is as you are seeing it. You have the for keyword, then followed by the item, which is a variable that is standing for one item in a sequence you are iterating over. Then you have the end keyword, followed by the sequence you want to iterate over. Just like I said earlier, the sequence can be string, it can be a list of items, it can be a range of numbers or whatever. So let's see this in an example. Suppose we want to use loop to automate the numbers we printed earlier. To achieve the same result using the for loop, let's comment this out and see how easy you get that achieved using for loop. Okay, so I'm going to come to the end there. So we are going to have the for keyword, then we can say num, okay, standing for number, okay, and then we are going to say in, we have the range function, okay, so the range function is going to accept 2 arguments for now. So we have 1, or let's say 2 inputs. We have 1 and we are going to have 11, right? So we have the colon. So inside of the for block, that is where we are going to write the code that we want to execute in this iteration. So we are going to print num, okay, standing for number. The range function produces a sequence of numbers from the start, which is 1, and to the stop, which is 11 here. But the stop will not be included in the result. So it's going to start from 1 and stop at 10 in this case. Let's run this now and see what we have. So you can see now that we achieve the same result as printing 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 10. So using just these 2 lines of code with the for loop, we achieve the same result as these 10 lines of code. This is how the range function works. The range function is used to generate a sequence of numbers. So now we are generating from 1 to 10. The second input here will not be included. The range is going to stop at 1 less than the second input. Okay, so that is how the range function works. So the loop iterates over the sequence of numbers generated by the range function. And what we did is we print each number in that sequence. We start at 1 and end at 10. In the first iteration, num is going to be 1. So now the range function is going to generate from 1 to 10. So in the first iteration of the for loop, num is going to be 1. So we print 1. After executing all of this, we go back to the sequence. The next item in the sequence is going to be 2. So at that time, num is going to be 2. So we print 2. After executing this, we go back to the iteration, we go back to the sequence. The next item is going to be 3. So we print 3. The next item is going to be 4. We print 4. The next item is going to be 5. We print 5. And it goes on and on like that up to the last item in the sequence, which is going to be 10. And then we print 10. A string can also be treated as a sequence. And in that case, we can also iterate over a string using the for loop. For example, let's say we want to iterate over the string of Python. So let's comment this out now. Okay, so let's say we have a string of, string of Python. Okay, so this can also be treated as a sequence, and since it can be treated as a sequence, we can use the for loop to iterate over it. So to do that, we are going to have the for keyword. Okay, so that's going to be for keyword. So we can say this is character. Okay, then followed by the in keyword. So we are saying for character in Python. Okay, so we have a colon. The colon is very important. So we are going to print character now. So if we run this now, we are going to see that each character in the string of Python will be printed. So Python in this case is taken as a sequence. So in the first iteration, P is standing for character. So we print character. After executing this line of code, we go back to the sequence. The next item is Y. Okay, so we print Y, which is what we have here. So the next item in the sequence is T. We printed T, which is what we have here. So the next is H, we printed H. The next is O, we printed O. And the next is N, we printed N. So it is not just range of numbers or list of numbers that can be iterated using the for loop. We can also iterate over strings. Okay, so strings can also be treated as a sequence. Let's say we want to count the number of vowels in a sentence. We can use the for loop to iterate over the sentence and check if a letter is a vowel letter. And if it is a vowel letter, we count the number of vowel letters present in the sentence. Okay, so for example, let's say we have a sentence. I'll comment this out so Python does not consider that when running the code. Okay, so we can say we have a sentence. Let's have a variable with the name of sentence. So we can have a sentence saying Python is an awesome, let's say it's an awesome programming language. All right. Okay. Now, to count the number of vowels in this sentence, we are going to have another variable which is going to contain all the vowels letter present in English. So we have A, E, I, O, U. All right. Okay. Now to count the number of vowels in this sentence, we are going to use the for loop to iterate over the sentence. So we are going to say for character, okay, in sentence. Okay. So sentence is our sequence now. So okay, so we are going to check. Okay, so we are going to say if or character. Okay, we are going to use the lower method to turn the current character in the sequence to a lowercase, because here we have P to be uppercase. So we are going to, and just in case we have a long sentence and we have many of the characters in uppercase, so this lower method is going to turn the character to lowercase. So we are going to say if character.lower is in vowels. Okay, we have vowels. Vowel is if character.lower is in vowels, so we are going to, okay, let's have a count cell. So we are going to say vowel, let's say vowel count is, let's start from 0. So the count is going to start from 0. Now if character is in vowel, so we are going to increase this count by 1. So we are going to say vowel count or plus equals 1. Okay, now if we run this now, this for loop is going to iterate over this sentence. Okay, so in the first iteration, character is going to be P. So it's going to check if P is in vowels. So it's going to check if P is in this string. If P is there, it's going to increase the count. But for example, P is not here, so it's going to skip over that. Then it goes on and on like that. So that's how it's going to count the number of vowels we have in this sentence. Let's run this now. Okay, so after running it totally, we are going to print. We have print vowels count. Okay, We run that now. So you can see that the number of vowels letters we have in this sentence is 14. You can do that manually and see we have O, which is 1, we have 2, we have 3, we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So you see that our logic is actually correct. The second type of loop in Python is the while loop. The while loop continues repeating the task as long as the condition is true. The while loop now is not with sequence. Unlike the for loop is used to iterate over a sequence. But the while loop, it continues to perform a certain task as long as a condition is true. The syntax of the while loop is as you are seeing it. You have the while keyword followed by the condition, and then the code you want to execute as long as the condition is true. For example, let's have an example of a while loop. So let me comment this out. Okay. So if we run this now, we have nothing because everything has been commented out. Okay. So now to write a while loop, you have the while keyword followed by the condition. Let's create a condition. Let's say we have a variable with the name of count. Okay. So let's say count is 5. All right. Okay. So we are going to say while count is greater than while count is greater than 0. Okay, presently count is 5, so count is greater than 0. That means this condition is true. So the code we want to execute while count is greater than 0 is we want to print count. Okay, now if we run this, I want you to take note of something. Okay, so let me run this now. So you can see that count is being printed endlessly because the while loop is going to continue execution for as long as the condition is true. Count is 5, that means the condition is true. So count will continually be printed. As you can see it now, count is continually being printed because the condition is true. This is not the kind of behavior you will want in your program. In that case, we have to be careful to ensure that the condition will eventually become false at a point. Otherwise, the loop will run forever, which is what we call an infinite loop. So to do that, I'm going to stop this manually now, and then we are going to create a logic that will make the condition to eventually becomes false. All right. So the logic we are going to create is after printing count, we are going to reduce count by 1. So when count is 5, we reduce count by 1 to become 4. And then we print count again, which should be 4. We reduce it to 3. We print it again, we reduce it to 2. Okay, so to do that, we are going to say count. I'm going to say count. Okay, so that will be minus equals 1. Okay, so if we run this again now, we're going to have something like a countdown. So we have 5. Count is originally 5 at the execution of the code. So count is greater than 0, which means the condition is true. Then we printed count. Okay, that's why we have 5 here. After printing 5, we reduce count by 1. So count is 4. Then we go back again to the start of the loop. Okay, so count is currently 4 and 4 is greater than 0. So we printed count, which is 4 at that moment. After printing it, we reduce count by 1. So after that, count is going to be 3. So you go back to the start of the loop. 3 is greater than 0. We printed it. And then we reduce it by 1, which is 2. We go back to the start of the loop. Count is 2 is greater than 0. We printed 2. And then we reduce it by 1. Okay. So currently count will be 1. We go back to the start of the loop. 1 is greater than 0. We printed count. Okay. After printing it, that is this 1. We reduce it by 1, which is 0. So at this moment, count is currently 0. And 0 is not greater than 0. So that is why we don't have 0 printed there. So that is going to stop the while loop because the condition has become false. Okay, so we can use the while loop in a realistic example. So, for example, we want to create a program that will keep asking for the password of our user until the user provides the correct password. If the user provides the wrong password, we are going to use the while loop to keep asking for the password until he or she provides the correct password. Okay, so to implement that, let's comment this out. Okay, so we are going to have a variable and we're going to call that variable correct password. Okay, So let's assign a value. Let's create a random password. Okay, let's call the correct password random password. Okay, random password. All right. Okay, now we are going to ask for the user password. So we are going to call that input password. Okay, so that is going to be the password we want to get from our user. Initially, we are going to make it an empty string. All right, so we are going to have a while loop that will keep asking for the password until the correct password is imputed. So we are going to say while input password, while input or password is not equal, is not equal to correct password. So we're going to, okay, we need a colon there. We need a colon here. We need a colon, all right. So while input password is not equal to correct password, we are going to say input password is equal to input. We need the input function now. Okay, so we're going to pass prompts to the user. And then we're going to say enter your password, right? This while loop will continue running if the input password is not equal to the correct password. So as soon as the user provide a correct password, then we are going to grant them access to the system. We are going to say access granted, right? Access granted. Okay, so let's add an exclamation to that. So let's run this and see what we have. Enter your password. So I'm going to input the wrong password. Okay, so I'm going to say wrong password, which is not the password. So enter your password again. I'm going to enter another wrong password. Okay, enter another wrong password. So the while loop will continue running until as far as the condition is true. So if I keep entering the wrong password till infinity, the while loop is going to keep asking me to enter my password till infinity until I enter the correct password. So the correct password now is random password. So I'm going to say random password. Okay. Right. So as soon as I enter that, I'm going to be granted access. Okay. So the while loop will continue running as far as the condition remains true. Okay. So how do you know which loop to use at a certain time, given that you have the for loop and you have the while loop? Use a for loop when you know the number of iterations you want to perform in advance. For example, iterating over a list, a range of numbers, or a sequence. Anytime you are dealing with a sequence or a string, so you use the for loop for that. And you use the while loop when the number of iterations depends on a certain condition. When you want to keep repeating the task as long as the condition is true, you use a while loop for that. So loops are fundamental part of programming. You need to get a grasp of them. In the next lesson, we'll learn more about the range function, which we've used with loops in this lesson. So I will see you in the next lesson.